Hey folks, Jordan Sheridan, live on a Monday, September 24th. Hope everyone is having a lovely, lovely day. I am live on Periscope, live on YouTube, live on Facebook, and very, very busy news day. And I am going to cover some things that are not in the news as well. Let me just make sure everything's wonderful on YouTube, because YouTube, unfortunately, tends to start a little bit late compared to the other channels that I'm on. And of course, it is not working on YouTube. Can you see me on YouTube? Let me know. Let me check here. What will be, will be. Okay. YouTube is working. Okay, great. Hey, I'm seeing comments. It shows up on my phone that I'm on YouTube, but not on actual YouTube. As a reminder, on this Monday, I am a super chat, so you could contribute right there in the super chat. And also, we are almost at $5,000 for the Status Coup GoFundMe. We're officially launching statuscoup.com in October. Among other things that are coming in October. Everything that we've been working on behind the scenes, pretty much dropping soon. It's almost October. So the GoFundMe, let's see where we're at with the GoFundMe as we start this live stream. We're at $4,600. So can we get to 5,000 by the end of today? I think we can. I want you to definitely press the share button. Let's get this out to more people. Trying to go a little bit earlier today. So see what the audience is as we test out different times. Because when we launch statuscoup.com, pretty much going to be going live the same time every day. So hope everyone had a lovely weekend. And again, this is a super chat, so keep it going. Now, I usually would start out with anything Trump, anything Russia, anything BS. But I'm going to start out with what's going on with Rod Rosenstein, because I think it's actually a sign of things to come as far as the progressive movement and as far as the corporate Democrats. It could be a good thing for progressives, and it could be a bad thing for progressives. So, Rod Rosenstein, all of a sudden this morning, he's the Deputy Attorney General. He was appointed to oversee the Mueller probe after Jeff Sessions, the actual Attorney General, recused himself, which obviously Trump didn't like, because Trump doesn't actually know that the Justice Department is supposed to be separate from the executive branch. So basically, Rosenstein has been overseeing the Russia probe. You know what I think about the Russia probe? I think it's a whole lot of propaganda and hot air made and put out there in the media to make you think that we are now at the Cold War 2.0 and distract from the real reasons we have Donald Trump, which aren't Russia, but the fact that the majority of the country is poor, that a huge swath of the country have had their jobs shipped to other countries, and the fact that the Democratic Party abandoned the working class pretty much starting out in the 70s. I always keep it real. Now, is it possible? Did Russia, employ trolls and propaganda to try and, sow discord? Absolutely. But so does the United States. Much worse, by the way, than that. So, what Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, a New York Times piece, had come out saying that he was going to wear a wire at one point in a conversation with Trump, and that he was talking about they need to exercise the 25th Amendment, which would be cabinet officials basically removing Trump. So obviously Trump wasn't happy about that, and the White House wasn't happy about that. So cable news and all the pundits on Twitter this morning, all in a tizzy, because Rod Rosenstein was going over to meet with the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and everybody thought, this is it. They're going to fire Rod Rosenstein. This means that they're going to appoint basically their own puppet in to oversee the Mueller probe and essentially get rid of the Mueller probe, or essentially make it so it can't actually investigate. Because Rod Rosenstein has been the person Mueller has to go to get things approved, whether they're going to prosecute certain people or need extra resources or whatever. And as a reminder, Jake said it, this is a super chat, so leave some coin this Monday morning, or if you haven't contributed yet, there's the GoFundMe link. I'll put the GoFundMe link in here again. I want to get to 5,000 by the end of today, so we'll see if we can do it. We're at 4,600 now. And if you don't know about the GoFundMe, this is all so we can get back in the field. Me and Ty want to get back in the field. There's certain stories that I'm dying to go cover. In particular, this week, I'm thinking about going down to Dallas. I want to go cover the protests that are going on after another black man, this time killed in his actual apartment as a white police officer had the wrong apartment and went and shot him dead. So I'm going to get to that story after this. So Rosenstein goes to the White House this morning, meets with John Kelly, isn't fired, and doesn't resign. So, of course, the pundits who all said this is what's going to happen had it wrong. Well, guess what? Now, Trump, it is reality TV. Trump's very good at this. Trump wants to meet with Rod Rosenstein on Thursday. So, why does he want to meet on Thursday? Well, what else is happening on Thursday? The Senate Judiciary Committee is going to have Christine Ford, the California professor who has come out accusing Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh of sexual assault. She is set to testify on Thursday, as is Brett Kavanaugh. So Trump just conveniently, coincidentally, wants to meet with the Deputy Attorney General on Thursday, and there's going to be a drip, drip, drip. Is he going to fire him? Is he going to resign? What's going to happen? And basically Trump is trying to distract from the Christine Ford hearing to basically the Republicans at this point. They're probably going to lose. Probably the House, definitely. No, I would say definitely it looks like the House, possibly the Senate. So Trump is trying to do anything possible to at least get Kavanaugh through, because not getting Kavanaugh through would very much upset his base, and Republicans are very worried that's going to depress turnout even more. And Trump, of course, he's afraid of going to prison, but he also doesn't want the Democrats to take control of both the House and the Senate, because then he knows impeachment is coming. Why I think this is super important. By the way, just so you know, there is another woman who has come forward over the weekend. The New Yorker has a piece that there's another woman. Her name is, let's see, Deborah Ramirez, who is a 53-year-old woman who went to college with Brett Kavanaugh, and she is accusing Brett Kavanaugh of taking his genitals out at a college dorm party and thrusting his penis on her without her consent. Her accusation, if you read the New Yorker piece, is a little bit more tepid than Christine Ford's. She does acknowledge there are gaps in her memory. She took several days to make sure she felt strong enough that this was indeed Brett Kavanaugh who did this at a party, and now she has come out and said not only that she believes this was Brett Kavanaugh, and she remembers people chanting, Brett Kavanaugh just put his penis on this girl at the party, but she says there should be an FBI investigation. So now you have two women accusing Brett Kavanaugh of this. And why I think this is important, I think Trump is going to fire Rod Rosenstein on Thursday. I think for two reasons. Number one, he wants the if he were to fire Rod Rosenstein previously, before this New York Times article came out, then he would have a real problem, because it would come off like obstruction of justice. He's firing the person that stepped in to oversee the Mueller probe, who isn't doing his bidding, because Rod Rosenstein has essentially let Mueller do what he needs to do in the investigation. But after this New York Times story that alleged or claimed sources said Rod Rosenstein had said, thought he might go into a meeting with Trump wearing a wire, and had made comments about invoking the 25th Amendment on Trump, Trump will feel he has more just cause to fire Rod Rosenstein without it looking like obstruction of justice. So that's number one. I think you're going to see Trump fire Rod Rosenstein on Thursday. I think he's going to wait in the day so that when he does fire Rod Rosenstein, it is right in the critical time that Christine Ford is testifying in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Because if Trump is good at one thing, it is manipulating the hell out of the media. And as we know, we talk about it on this channel all the time, the corporate media is not exactly journalists, capital J. They are a bunch of puppets that basically parade around and basically sensationalize news and make it into sport. That's what the corporate media does. So they might be paying attention to Christine Ford's testimony 1 minute, and then Trump fires Rod Rosenstein, and they go like dogs that get distracted onto the next thing. So essentially, what Trump is trying to do is cover up the Ford hearings, distract onto something else, which would be a pretty big bombshell if he does fire Rod Rosenstein. So this theory by me, apparently, is exactly what he wants to do. This is from Gabe Sherman in the Vanity Fair. I'll read it to you. The strategy was to try and do something really big. Trump wanted to nuke Rosenstein to save Kavanaugh's bacon. At the beginning of one of the most consequential weeks of Donald Trump's presidency, an enormous smoke bomb was detonated in the news cycle when Axios, deeply wired in Trump's West Wing, reported that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein had, quote, offered to resign. Quickly, a head-spinning array of conflicting accounts were put forth. Had he been fired? Was he heading to the White House to be fired? Or was he going to a regularly scheduled meeting? Finally, Sarah Huckabee Sanders brought a measure of clarity by tweeting that whatever was going to happen to Rosenstein would happen on Thursday when the president returned to New York. For all the morning's madness, there may have been an underlying logic. Over the weekend, as Brett Kavanaugh's prospects appeared increasingly imperiled, Trump faced two tactical options, both of them fraught. One was to cut Kavanaugh loose, but he was also looking for ways to dramatically shift the news cycle away from his embattled Supreme Court nominee. According to a source briefed on Trump's thinking, Trump decided that firing Rosenstein would knock Kavanaugh out of the news, potentially saving his nomination and Republicans' chances for keeping the Senate. Quote, the strategy was to try and do something really big, the source said. The leak about Rosenstein's resignation could have been the result, and it certainly had the desired effect of driving Kavanaugh out of the news cycle for a few hours. Rosenstein still has his job, at least until Thursday, leaving open multiple possibilities regarding the underlying reality. Regardless, Trump has wanted to fire Rosenstein from the moment he read the New York Times article that reported Rosenstein had discussed secretly tape recording Trump and rallying cabinet secretaries to invoke the 25th Amendment. I actually thought this is exactly what was happening, and then I found this piece to reinforce it before I went live. So, why is this important? Why am I telling you? Why am I starting out this Monday basically talking about the Trump and the palace intrigue, about Rod Rosenstein and all this? Because I don't think there's any doubt, really, that Trump is going to fire Rod Rosenstein. He now has, I would say, I don't think it's just cause, but he could say, I have just cause to fire the Deputy Attorney General who oversees the Russia investigation because he either seriously or joked about wearing a wire or basically a coup d'etat of my administration, which would be invoking the 25th Amendment. So that way, Trump and probably his lawyers are telling him we can skirt around the thought of obstruction of justice of the Mueller probe. And of course, I mean, you don't have to be a rocket science. He's waiting till Thursday because Christine Ford is going to testify. And whatever you think of her accusations, if you're just coming to this late, another woman has come forward, Deborah Ramirez, saying that in college at a freshman year dorm party at Yale, Brett Kavanaugh thrust his penis on her. She did not consent and essentially put it in her face and made her to touch it before she got away. This is very damning stuff. Two women, obviously, with most of these men, you start seeing a pattern of multiple women coming out saying similar things. But the bottom line is this. Why do I find this important? Because well, first of all, it's important because these women should be heard, and because I think it's more than likely true that Brett Kavanaugh is guilty of this. But if Trump is going to fire Rod Rosenstein on Thursday, which I think he's going to. I think he's doing it to distract, like I said. Well, what you're going to have there is an absolute, almost positivity that you're going to see unprecedented turnout in the midterms from Democrats. And I'm not talking only about progressive Democrats. I'm talking about your establishment auntie and uncle. I think if Trump fires Rod Rosenstein, basically to get rid of him and to distract so that Brett Kavanaugh could get on the Supreme Court, I think there's more than likely a definite likelihood that the Democrats are going to have unprecedented turnout and they are going to win the House and most likely the Senate. Now, for the resistance, that's a great thing. We take back Congress, we take the House, we take the Senate, and now we can impeach Trump. For progressives who actually want not only to get rid of Donald Trump, but to actually put progressive Democrats in charge to challenge Trump, but also challenge the corrupt Democratic Party establishment. I can't do pom-poms here. Do I think Trump is bad? Yes. It's frustrating that I have to put a disclaimer out there constantly, but whenever you say it's not just about Trump, it's about the corrupt corporate Democrats, you're accused of being a Russian propaganda, agent of the Kremlin. I am saying I think Trump firing Rod Rosenstein is going to end up putting the Nancy Pelosi wing of the Democratic Party back in charge. I think Trump firing Rosenstein is going to basically, in one breath, galvanize the Democratic base. Oh, this is one step too far. This is past the red line, and we are in an unprecedented constitutional crisis because Trump is basically firing the person who's supposed to independently oversee the criminal investigation into Trump's campaign. And I think it's going to galvanize the Democratic base. And as a result, I think you're going to see the Democrats retake the House and the Senate. I also think you're going to see much, much more heated opposition against progressives to basically say, like they did with Hillary Clinton, shut up Jordan, shut up Jimmy Dore, shut up all these people. We need to defeat the Republicans. Look what Donald Trump is doing. He has fired Rod Rosenstein. He is an unprecedented threat to democracy. And we need to, bite your tongue, suck it up, and vote for establishment Democrats and vote for the Democrats so they will take out the Republicans. That's what I think is going to happen. And unfortunately, I think they might be successful because I think the Democratic Party obviously has not learned their lessons from 2016. They're still running based on how much can we fundraise. They're still running based on the stale politics of job training, expanding Obamacare, tax cuts for the middle class, which is all window dressing, as we know. They're basically running on continued crumbs for the masses as we keep our cocktail parties with Wall Street, big oil, big pharma, and Silicon Valley. So, it's one thing if the Democratic Party is going to take over the House and the Senate, but you're actually going to have more progressives become Democratic congressmen or senators. But I think what you're actually going to see is the Democratic Party, if and when Rosenstein gets fired, they're basically going to say, we need to elect the Democrats that are electable. We need to go elect, the establishment Democrats. And you're going to start seeing a lot more pressure on progressives to come out and vote for the Beto O'Rourke's in Texas. And you know what? I don't like Ted Cruz. And if I lived in Texas, even though I don't think Beto O'Rourke is actually a progressive, based on his voting record and the donations he takes in, I would vote for Beto O'Rourke because I think it's different on a state level. Beto O'Rourke is not going to have an office if he becomes a senator. He can't bring the United States to war. The president can. He could vote for it, but for example, if you're looking at Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump versus a Beto O'Rourke versus Ted Cruz, I am a lot more likely, based on the fact that Ted Cruz I think is horrendous, to just hold my nose and vote for a Beto O'Rourke if that's the only option. I feel different when the vote is for president. I feel much different when the vote is for president, because the president has a hell of a lot more power than one senator. That's for sure. So I think this is a mixed bag. On one end, do I like the Republican Party? No. But what I fear is Rosenstein's going to be fired, and then the Democratic Party citing, oh, this is an unprecedented threat, vote blue no matter who, as we're hearing, vote blue no matter who, and we're basically going to put back in the Obama-Clinton Democrats to take over. And all the focus then will be on impeaching Trump and Trump, and they're going to they're going to try for everyone to go back to sleep economically. To not fight for Medicare for all. To not fight them, the Democratic Party, on Medicare for all. To not fight them, the Democratic Party, on free public college. To not fight them, the Democratic Party, on ending private prisons. to not fight them, the Democratic Party, on ending fracking. They are going to call for a uniform disarmament of the progressive movement and to tell us to suck it up and vote Democrat and to fall in line. Sorry, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. Do I think it would be bad if Trump fires Rosenstein? Yes. Do I think the Russia investigation is needed? Yeah, because I think there's efforts. I think there's probably clear evidence that Trump engaged in money laundering with Russia, and I think that should come out. And I think he's done money laundering with Saudi Arabia and other countries as a private businessman, and probably while he was a candidate. That's what I've always thought Mueller is going to find the most evidence of: money laundering, not collusion, which really doesn't even have a true legal term, a true legal definition. So I'm not against there being a Russia investigation. I think there should be. I've been against the unprecedented propaganda and hysteria over the Russia investigation that we've had to consume for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 2 years. Jesus Christ. So that's what I've been against. Not the fact that there is an investigation, the fact that this has literally been the Democratic Party's lesson from 2016. Not to actually read the polls that say Medicare for All is polling 70%. 70% among people in America, 85% among the Democratic Party, 52% among the Republican Party. They want you to fall back asleep. They want to say, Trump, 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 fired Rosenstein, Russia, 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 Trump, 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 and fall asleep and not hold the Democratic Party as accountable as they want you to hold Trump. You could do both. So, it's up to you. But just know what's coming. You are going to, if Rosenstein is fired, you are going to be told, fall in line. You're going to be told, suck it up. We don't have the luxury of voting, for your perfect progressive candidate, and go and vote for the Democratic candidate running for Congress and the Senate where you live. That's what you're going to be told. So, totally up to you. Totally up to you. But that's what's going on. The meeting is scheduled for Thursday between Rosenstein and Trump on the same day that Christine Ford, the woman who accused Brett Kavanaugh, is scheduled to testify. And who knows, between now and Thursday, we don't know if other news organizations are working on, more women that might come out of the woodwork and accuse Kavanaugh. Right now, we have Christine Ford that had made the accusation of Brett Kavanaugh and a friend pinning her down and trying to rape her during a high school party. And now we have Deborah Ramirez, who has come out and said during a college party at Yale while Kavanaugh was a freshman that he took out his penis and thrust it in her face and had her touch it against her will. Like I said in the beginning of this video, the Ramirez allegation is a little less, I wouldn't say strong, but it's a little less certain. The accuser is admittedly saying, I'm less certain. She says she has gaps in her memory, and she took several days to come out publicly on the record. But she says that this did happen, and she didn't know that it was Brett Kavanaugh at the time. She didn't know who he was, but she heard someone screaming, Brett Kavanaugh just put his penis in this girl's face, like making a joke at me. So my thoughts, I think when you have more women coming out, I don't think two women are confusing Brett Kavanaugh with someone else. I really don't. I think that's very far-fetched and hard to believe. And I think that particularly in Christine Ford's case, for reasons I stated in my videos last week, I have no reason to think she's not telling the truth. And now that you have another woman claiming that Brett Kavanaugh did this, and you have other people saying that Brett Kavanaugh was known as a partier and a drinker in high school and college, as were a lot of people in his high school, I think it was a prep school and college. It is a he said, she said at this point, but you do have multiple women saying the same thing, the same type of aggressive, unsolicited, unwanted behavior. So, moving on, I'm going to remind you folks, we did a whole marathon drive on my birthday last week. So we had this going and all of that for the GoFundMe. You could still contribute to the GoFundMe. We're trying to reach 5,000 I'm hoping by the end of today. That might be a little bold. But as you can see, we're at 4,600 right now. So if you have a few dollars left over from the weekend, now's your time. We'd like to go out in the field as soon as possible. We want to cover the Botham Jean protests that are going on. Botham Jean was a 26-year-old African-American murdered while literally hanging out in his apartment by a white police officer. I definitely have interest in going down to the Bayou Bridge pipeline and covering that, the protests going on there. I have interest in going to cover a lot of these school shootings and the aftermath of that, since in America it's now normalized for people to just get blown up in their schools and malls and concerts and movie theaters, and for thoughts and prayers to go for a few hours before we go back to our next food fight over Russia and Trump's tweets. So there's a lot of things we want to go cover. I can't thank right now it's 80 people. 80 people have contributed. We've had the GoFundMe up for 12 days. So definitely appreciate your support. I'll pop it in, couple times a live stream. Keep the funding coming. I do of course like doing daily live streams, but you know where my heart's at. I'd like to get back in the field. So definitely appreciate your contributions. Now, moving on. The Dallas police officer that killed Botham Jean, Amber Geiger, has been fired. It was announced today that she was fired by the Dallas Police Department. I don't know why it took this long for them to fire her. Her story has changed 2-3 times since the evening in early September that she came back to her apartment. She lived right above Botham Jean. She's a 30-year-old white police officer. She was off duty at the time, and she basically saying that she wrongly thought she was going to her apartment, ended up intruding on Botham Jean's apartment, who lived directly under her, and then shot him dead. Botham Jean's funeral was recently held. There have been protests down in Dallas as to the fact, A, why is she not currently sitting in jail? She was let out on $300,000 bond, and B, why has she not immediately been fired? So today we got one of those answers. The Dallas Police Chief Renee Hall has fired an officer whom she previously said she could not fire. Amber Geiger, 30, who was charged with manslaughter in the fatal shooting of Botham Shem Jean on September 6th, was fired Monday. Geiger has said in the past that she mistook Jean's apartment for hers and opened fire because she believed Jean was an intruder. Geiger was fired because she engaged in, quote, adverse conduct when she was arrested for manslaughter on September 6th. An internal affairs investigation concluded, according to a news release from the Dallas PD. Geiger, who has the right to appeal her firing under civil service rules, was hired in November 2013 and assigned to the Southeast Patrol Division. Before being fired, Geiger told officers that while off duty but in her police uniform, she inserted a unique door key with an electronic chip into the door keyhole of what turned out to be Jean's apartment. The door, which was slightly ajar prior to Geiger's arrival, fully opened under the force of the key insertion, according to a search warrant affidavit. The affidavit says that the door being opened alerted Jean to Geiger's presence. It says Geiger described the apartment as being dark, and she thought, quote, she had encountered a burglar, which was described as a large silhouette across the room in her apartment. Geiger drew her firearm, gave, quote, verbal commands that were ignored by Jean, and then she fired 2 shots. Jean was shot once and died. That is the story from the Dallas Police Department. If you want to look at it, it took 2.5 to 3 weeks for them to fire this police officer. I don't know what took so long in their investigation, because her story changed from the evening it happened to after. At first, she said the door was slightly open, and she thought it was her apartment, and she thought it was a burglar. Then she said the door was closed. Other people who live in the apartment have come out with videos showing that the door could not have been left slightly open, because they have very heavy doors that right when you open it, once you let it go, it immediately slams, so there's really no way to keep it, quote, propped open. There's also the issue that Botham Jean had a red mat in front of his door, whereas Amber Geiger didn't. So wouldn't you recognize if you get to your apartment and the mat that you have isn't there? So there's a lot of things that don't make sense. I would say, number one, I tweeted this, and it took so long for them to fire her. So spare me the, great for the Dallas PD. No, they fired her because they finally realized there is no amount of spin that they could put out there to cover for this police officer. Like, what could they possibly put out? They have already tried to smear Botham Jean by leaking to the media that he had pot in his apartment. So what? I've had pot in my apartment. Many Americans have pot in their apartments in places where it's not technically legal. So what? Does that somewhat tied to the fact that a police officer comes over and shoots you dead? So they were leaking that to try and smear Botham Jean. And this is what police departments generally do when they actually just straight up murdered someone and can't actually justify it. They try and basically defame the victim. We've seen that with Trayvon Martin. We've seen that, he's wearing a hoodie and he was up to no good. And we saw that with Michael Brown and many, many others. So bottom line, although, technically this is a good thing that they fired this police officer, she should have been fired the next day. She should not have been let out of jail. I think she was in jail for not even 24 hours when she got out on $300,000 bond. You think a black cop would have been, an investigation would have happened for weeks before getting fired if a black cop off duty went and shot a white woman? Hell no. Do you think a black cop would have gotten out on $300,000 bond in less than 24 hours? Absolutely not. So this isn't just about Botham Jean. This is about our legal system or our injustice system. Because we don't have a justice system. We have laws for wealthy, mostly white, powerful, connected people, and laws for everybody else. And the police are also shielded from laws. 9.5 out of 10 times. So, an innocent man who apparently was a prayerful man, apparently wanted to, had aspirations of moving back to St. Lucia, where his family is from, and running running for public office there, who a New York Times story had come out this weekend, basically recounting that Botham Jean for his entire life did everything he could to avoid confrontation or interaction with the police because he knew for black men, it's dangerous just being a black man in America, and you could get shot and killed by police if you have even one encounter. So he went out of his way to avoid encounters with police. He went out of his way to dress nicer than his friends. Instead of wearing a short sleeve shirt, he wore like a button down short sleeve shirt. So the question is, why did it take the police department this long to investigate it? And why did it take this long to fire the woman? You can't tell me it took 3 weeks to find out that she had no reason for doing this. Either you're going to say she had a mental break or some type of mental episode which caused her caused her to see things that weren't there or caused her to forget time and place, or she just went and murdered someone. This is not manslaughter. That's what they're charging her with. This is murder. When you intrude on someone's home and you shoot them and kill them, that's murder. It would be murder for most people in America. Somehow she's being charged with manslaughter. So Paul says, hell no, imagine if a black cop does this. That's what I'm saying. You don't have to imagine it because we know what would happen. So, so far, that's the update. She's been fired. Obviously, people are calling, protesters, activists, Black Lives Matter are calling for her to be thrown in jail and await trial. She is out on bail, out on bond. But we'll see what happens. There were protests where caskets were taken to a Dallas Cowboys game to symbolize Botham Jean. I've been trying to monitor what's going on with the protests down there because I possibly would want to go down there. That's part of what this GoFundMe is for, so we have the funds to get down there and cover these important stories. I think the Botham Jean case could become as big as Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, where we saw protests in Ferguson for weeks, and other high-profile cases where, black teenagers or early 20s were killed for no reason by police. And this instance is particularly egregious because, black men that I've spoken with, including Ty, my photojournalist, has talked about, driving while black and, basically saying you're endangered just doing simple things while black. Well, what do you call chilling on the couch while black now makes you an endangered species. It's insane. Low Key says a black cop actually did the same thing. He was charged with murder after a year. Oh, I'd love information on that. Email Jordan. I'll type it in. Email Jordan at protonmail.com. I'd love to read that, and I'll let the audience know. And as a reminder, if you want us to go down there or other places, there's the GoFundMe. Totally understand if you can't do it. If you can, keep the contributions coming because we really, we're not waiting until we hit 50,000 to get back in the field. We're going to do it earlier than that. And we're looking for funds so we can stay out in the field. The worst thing is when you get out in the field, but then you're like, oh, we only have like 2 or 3 days worth of money to cover this. So thank you to everyone who's been contributing. Keep it coming. And from Botham Gene. So Botham Gene this has only been going on for a month. Obviously, the murder of black men has been going on for many, many years. But the Flint water crisis has been going on for 4.5 years now. 4.5 years it's been going on. So as I reported over the summer when we went to Flint, we showed you the 3.5, 4, 5 hour lines in some cases where residents were having to line up for blocks to basically get 2 cases of bottled water that were being sent in from donations. They were being sent in from donations because the state of Michigan shut down the water pods in Flint. The state of Michigan shut down the water pods, claiming that the water was now meeting EPA regulations in Flint. I'm working on a massive story about that. As of now, it's still on target to be published in October. I look forward to that story being published so you can see the amount of work Jen and I did to get the truth out. I think this story will shed a lot of light on the government's claims that the water is now meeting EPA regulations in Flint. But when I was at these churches that had the donations and the lines wrapped around the blocks for hours in Flint, I kept hearing from the people from the church that, right now we have enough coming in where we could open up the church once a week for people, but they're running out. So basically, this was just the churches, and were basically just, if they had enough water to donate, they would. So it wasn't very consistent where residents could go and get the bottled water. It was really up to how many people from around the country donated. Well, now it seems, unfortunately, the state obviously has been derelict in doing their job in helping the people. Now it looks like donations are actually running out for bottled water in Flint. So reading from this story, running low on donations, Flint water locations suspend distribution. One of the last places offering free bottled water in Flint has temporarily stopped their water distribution. West Court Church of God pastor Rob Butler says earlier this year, when the Flint water crisis was in the national news, he had no problem getting donations for their water distribution site. Quote, "We started getting donations from Maine and Washington and Florida and Texas and just everywhere. Very quickly, it became something that we could do every week, and so we're doing it every week," said Butler. Pastor Butler says 400 to 500 people showed up at the church on a typical Saturday afternoon to get water. It costs about $1,000 to get water for those families. But now, a shortage of donations means they will not have any water available this weekend and probably the following weekend too. Quote, "Now it's just at the point where we are at that wall. We've hit the wall of donations. We're not seeing donations on a weekly basis anymore. It's starting to become a little more sporadic. It's slowing down," said Butler. The church plans to continue water distribution in the future as long as funding is there. Quote, "We're not ending anything. Our heart is to be in this community, to be part of this community, to show the community that there is people that care, that we understand that yes, maybe the science proves that the water is getting better, but we realize that there is a trust issue and we're willing to step forward and we will be there for you," said Butler. So I'll put the link to the church if you want to donate in the live stream. I have a few things to say about that. Number one, as I've been telling you, I think that the science that they're using to declare the water safe is highly, highly suspect. I think the story that Jen and I have been working on that's coming out in October will show you why we think that and why we know that based on our reporting. And I think that what this shows you is essentially the government, and I've been saying this for a long time, the government has essentially poisoned its people in Flint, then lied and tried to cover it up after the fact, and now are using very cherry-picked and in some cases illegal data to essentially say nothing to see here. Now we could close the water pods, and we, the government, don't have to pay so that the poorer people in Flint, because they are poor, can get bottled water. And now we're starting to see the donations dry up. So then what do people do? Flint is 42%. Flint has a 42% poverty rate. That's just the official census numbers. I think, based on being there, it is a lot worse than 42%. There are very few jobs to go around in Flint. The jobs that are going around in Flint are you can't even make a living wage. General Motors and the auto industry has long left after Bill Clinton and the Democrats essentially sold all the jobs offshore. So what are people to do in Flint? I was there over the summer. You could go to the playlist, Flint Water Crisis, on this channel and see people that I interviewed were literally out of water for their kids as I interviewed them at their homes. People don't have times to go. People didn't have time to go wait for 3-4 hours in between working two to three jobs for 2 cases of bottled water. Most of these people don't have, $100 a month to pay for bottled water. It's going to be a little better now because you're getting out of those hot summer months, but still, it's expensive to continually buy bottled water for a family. Let's say you're, 2 kids, 3 kids, 4 kids, whatever it is. So the fact that this is getting no attention in Flint, that A, the state has shut down the water pods with very suspect science. B, there's very little media actually looking into the suspect science because they just regurgitate whatever the state tells them. And 3, the media is essentially ignoring the fact that so many people in a major American city are now left to go without water, or they're going to have to go back to drinking the water out of the taps that I could tell you, because I've been there 12 times, as recently as July, that water out of most taps in Flint is not clean and is not without lead. So that's what happens when a government that doesn't actually represent the people is allowed to lie, is allowed to cherry pick their own data and science to claim, oh, we're meeting EPA regulations, and then shut down aid, which was the water pods, for heavily impoverished residents. And then guess what? The residents have to turn back to drinking the water. What do you think? What are people left to do? They're certainly, majority of them cannot afford water. Majority cannot afford to go out and pay $50 to $100 a month for cases and cases of water. And you're not just seeing this in Flint now. It's not getting much attention, but there's a lead crisis in Chicago. They found extremely high levels of lead. Detroit has now shut down taps coming from their fountains across schools because they found high lead and copper in the schools. And for who knows for how long. Most of these schools are extremely old. Most of these schools have plumbing that's 70 to 100 years old, and they don't do consistent testing in Detroit or other cities across the country. And a lot of these water utilities have been caught cheating on the testing by running the water the night before or the day of. And when you run the water before taking a lead and copper sample, you're flushing out the high levels of lead and copper, so you get an artificially lower number. Rosenstein, 57 schools in Detroit. So if you have kids, I would check into how old is the plumbing at your kids' schools. Have the schools had testing for lead and copper? When the water was, if they did, how was it tested? Did they leave the water not in use and totally stagnant for a minimum of 6 hours and then take the water right away? Because that's the accurate way to do water testing. I know Russia, I know Trump is big news all the time, but I think making sure our kids aren't drinking poisoned water all across the country is a little more important, or at least equally important. What do you think? Sometimes I feel like I'm beaten to my own drum because so few people cover the water contamination. But that's one of the stories we want to definitely cover on the road, so that's part of the GoFundMe. We'll put the link in one more time before I bolt for this early Monday live stream. And let me know in the live stream if you like this time. I went live around like 1:30, 2 o'clock. Might start going live more consistently this early so that I could focus on reporting and research later in the day. But I would like to go back to Flint. I would like to go to Detroit. There are other areas. in the country that have water problems that no one is covering. And by the way, a lot of people and residents in those communities have been begging for media to cover the water contamination in their areas and have been basically getting no answers and no one to pay attention to them. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help raise awareness and expose the fact that we have severely old infrastructure. We have governments and state governments that are trying to privatize the water system. They're trying to cut corners, like we saw in the Flint water crisis, by switching to unsafe water streams that have been, the Flint River had General Motors dumping in it forever. So I'm going to keep covering this. Boo Fry says, I like it at this time. Get my news on in the AM is good. It's only 11:30. There you go. I don't know what this means. I was thinking about going live around like 2:30 Eastern, so I guess that would be 11:30 Pacific. So that's where we're at, folks. I'll probably, if anything else breaks with Rosenstein or any of this stuff, I'll go live again this afternoon. Also going to go do a video right now for my Patreon subscribers, patreon.com/Jordan Chariton Reports. If you're not a Patreon, what in God's name are you doing? Right there, patreon.com/Jordan Chariton Reports. I'm doing video diaries, and when Ty feels better, we're going to start our podcast. He's having some back problems, unfortunately. So podcasts are coming, and when statusquo.com launches soon, we're going to be totally redoing the Patreon and offer extra bonus stuff. So that's the Patreon. If you're not a Patreon, appreciate it if you go check it out. You could subscribe as low as $2 a month, $5 a month. And as I said, we definitely need to get this GoFundMe moving. We cannot get in the field and create the media without you. So we got this 4,600 over 12 days, 80 people. Would love to get that to 100 people, 150, and ultimately 500, 1,000. Raising the numbers, raising the community that's part of this and part of building this is how we're going to do it. So thank you to everyone who's contributed. You can go there now, put the link in one more time before I sign off. And that's it for today, folks. Thanks for watching. Peace.